Albert loves to write about robots because they're very efficient. Officer Ryan is a jerk in any reality. And Benny Russell has a dream. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Today we're doing a review of Deep Space Nine's Season 6, Episode 13, Far Beyond the Stars, legendary episode with legendary writer Ira Steven Behr and showrunner, producer, cool guy. My name is Ryan T. Husk. We are also joined by Malissa Longo. It is a Nog episode with a very cool and iconic scene in there to talk about as well.
Hello.
Yay.
Yay.
All right, so this was a story by Mark Scott Zicree, written by, of course, Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler, directed by, lots to talk about here, Mr. Avery Brooks. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Right.
Doing good.
Yeah.
Doing really good. This is a wonderful episode.
Oh.
Clearly one of the classics. And before we get started, Ira, I want to say that, number one, as I'm watching this show, I have an increasing, even though I was already at a high level, it increases as I watch the show, just an admiration and respect for the work that you've done on Deep Space Nine, the way you maestroed this whole situation and put these stories out there for us to enjoy. So my hat's off to you. It just gets better and better as the seasons go on. And this is an example of just the level of greatness that you achieved on television. So thank you, Ira, for giving us these stories and telling these stories and putting them in these kinds of ways and format.
Thanks, Rock. Appreciate it.
It's amazing. There's so many places to go with this. Ryan, I don't know where you want to start.
Well, I'll tell you where I want to start. First of all, I'm going to default to you and Ira, of course, and Melissa as well, because I've seen this a few times, but I hadn't seen it in easily 10 or 15 years. So where I want to start is kind of where you want to start, Cirroc, which is, had you ever seen this episode before? I know you hadn't seen most of these episodes, but you were in it, but had you seen it? Did you know how powerful it was? Did you know how good it was? And then that's what I want to know first off.
Well, a few years ago at a convention in Vegas, Creation, we did a rewatch of Far Beyond the Stars.
Right, yeah.
And we had a panel assembled on stage for kind of reviewing this episode. And that was the first time I had seen it in maybe 10, 15 years, like you're saying, Ryan. So it was a great experience because I actually got to see it backstage with, majority of the cast that were in it. Ira, you were in part of that panel. Mark Zicree was part of that panel. And I think the moment that I remember the most was just before we got on stage, the climax scene with Benny Russell in the news office, saying that it's real, he created it. And there was a stillness across the room as we were all watching this together. And it kind of brought everybody to a silence and made everybody take note and pay attention. And that was one thing that I noticed, that, normally backstage everybody's shuffling around and, shooting the shit a little bit and just kind of moving around backstage. But everybody was still and fixated on the television screen as this episode was playing. So it had that kind of effect on all of us, and it was a special thing to actually witness it with everybody else and see it with everyone else. Ira, you remember that panel?
Yeah. I had not seen the show since it had aired, and I was a little bit hesitant. I'd seen I forget which one, but I recall maybe it was at the Motion Picture Museum, whatever it is in Beverly Hills, where they have those salutes when they did the Deep Space Nine salute. They showed something on the big screen and I thought the episode, whichever one it was, worked really well. But I was a little bit hesitant about sitting in the audience and watching it, because I thought, how is it going to play? The sound is going to be bad, which it was.
Right.
And, you know, the picture blown up that big wasn't graded. It did not look great. It really did not look that wonderful. But the fact is, it held the audience. I mean, it's a convention audience, but it was, I have to say, and, you know, I had some family there for the first time at a convention, besides Laura, and it was a pretty good experience, I have to say. It worked well, you know. Lord knows, if you had told me in 1999 that Far Beyond the Stars and Past Tense were going to be the episodes that in some ways, you know, mean a great deal to me in terms of the whole experience, I would have said no. You know, I wasn't a big fan of Message episodes at the time. I felt it was preaching to the converted. I thought it was easy, you know, an easy win, an easy pat on the back, and changed over the years because this country refuses to change, and the same goddamn lessons have to be taught again and again, and you have to reach people slowly, it seems, a few at a time. So the validity of the episodes still remain, unfortunately. So yes, I look back at Far Beyond the Stars with quite a bit of affection.
Well, Ira, you write magic, man. When we are rewatching this now, I don't know if it has the same hit as it did, 20 something years ago. I feel like it kind of hits even more nowadays. I think people grow to appreciate Deep Space Nine and Star Trek more, and Far Beyond the Stars, and you yourself more and more as time goes on. But honestly, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks this, but you write freaking magic and you captivate people. And not just that, but in this episode, you were talking about how, you blow it up on some 40-foot screen, hardly anything's going to look good that's made for television. But the performances, and we can get a bit more into that a little later, but I think a lot of the reason why everybody was so captivated when Benny Russell is breaking down is because that performance is so intense and so real. But
well, yeah, I mean, that was at the time, I mean, before the show was even cut together, that day on the set became kind of legendary, and everyone who was there was most affected by it. So yes. And I don't know about magic, but I do know that it used to bug me that when people, and then I'll get off this what bugged me topic, but it used to bug me during the run of the show that I'd meet people and they'd say, "Oh yeah, Deep Space Nine, my favorite episode was Trials and Tribulations," and it was like, that sucks, man. That's like that's not a Deep Space Nine episode. None of us even wanted to do that episode. We didn't even want to do the tribute to the 30 years. It's like anyone who told me that, I used to think, not a Deep Space Nine fan. Not really. Star Trek fan, definitely, but not really a Deep Space Nine fan. Because if that's their favorite episode, they are not on the bus. They are not watching the show. They are not digging the show. And to, like I said, to a lesser extent, I felt the Message shows, but now I look back, Duet, which was a Message show in its own way, Past Tense, they're good stuff. But yeah, Avery's performance quickly went into the stuff of legend within the show itself.
Yeah, I agree. just really quickly, also, I want to mention that Aron Eisenberg and I were on that panel together. And Melissa, you were there, this Far Beyond the Stars panel. And one of the moments that I remember is us cracking up on stage. Somebody said something that was
remember that.
I remember that very well too.
the two of us. He kept nudging me and looking at me like, "Did you hear what he just said?" And we just kept laughing about 10 minutes in that segment. So shout out
What
to
was it about? Can you tell
moment.
us?
I think Mark Zicree kind of used language that could be used in another way. One of those kind of double entendre phrases where you're saying, "Did he just say?" It was hard, whatever it was, but it was one of those joking moments. And you'll see it if you watch back on and watch that interview. You'll be able to catch the phrase that kind of set us off. But this episode, Hans doesn't get enough credit for this episode. I'd like to also give you an opportunity to just to talk about, kind of his involvement in the role that he played in this story.
Well, as you know, Hans is not in the best of health at the moment. I'm gonna see him again in a couple of weeks, so everyone should be sending good thoughts Hans's way. Well, it was, I had spent a lot of time working with Wolfie, and when Wolfie decided to take a hike at the end of season 5, there was just so much going on with 26 episodes a season. I just, I knew Hans and I had done like three shows already together, 3 series together. So, I pulled him in, and, it wasn't quite the, Wolfie and I could bang out a script in like 4 or 5 days. And that's with only writing half a day, the other half being in the room breaking stories. It was pretty, I look back on it, it's like, how the hell did we ever do what we did? But, that was then. With Hans, it took maybe a day or 2 longer, but you just go into that rhythm. And it was the same thing. He'd be at the typewriter. I'd be sitting next to him, and we just wail. And, if it sounded good to the both of us, then it stayed in. If one of us had a problem with it, then we, kept at it until we both could agree on it. So it was, I'm glad you brought it up, because Hans is one of those, Nog makes an appearance. My wife is convinced this is some kind of thing that he does, because he does it on all the Zooms, the show I'm on, he's doing it every day. He has to show up because he knows my attention is on someone else and he doesn't like it. So he needs to go, yes, but you love me. You don't love the people.
That's perfect.
That's exactly it.
There I am. Yeah.
And he's cute as hell too, by the way.
Cute.
He's a good guy. So yeah, so it was just easy, and it was fun, and given the stresses and strains, when I look at these shows, all I keep thinking is I never was down on the set. It was so rare to get time to go on the set, and so much of that, it's so important. We had no real writing producers down on the set. We were too busy, and I think the show could have used a producer on the set, a writer, at times in different episodes, to just tweak things or just make sure that the director was getting what we really wanted them to get. So the only fun, was the writer's room, because everyone was together and it was, a blast, and we would like the overmind, and, being locked in a room with someone who I liked, and so writing didn't become a chore. With Hans, it was never a chore, or rarely a chore. So we did a lot of good work together in those 2 seasons. I mean, he was his way. You know, the whole Vic Fontaine thing. He was I didn't have to pull his ass along in that. He was on board with that from the very beginning. He loved it too, which is why we needed to get that kind of stuff done. But you know, he he grew up in Mexico. You know, I mean, as a kid,
Really?
yeah.
Huh.
That's how he started out in life, and you know, I'm not sure whether Spanish was his first language or just his equal language along with English. So he knows a little bit about culture and race and racism. You know, I mean, he's he's of Jewish background and he grew up in Mexico. He's got a lot. He knows a lot about discrimination. You know, so Hans. I'll tell him we talked about him. So.
Yeah, please give him our love and our thoughts and prayers are going out to him. He's a very humble guy who's not into any kind of limelight and spotlight, and he deserves his dues for the work that he did. But I do want to say some of the things that you guys talk about in this episode. You bring up a lot of writers, H.G. Wells, Bradbury, Sturgeon, Herbert Ross.
Right.
These people that you're bringing up, are these people that you read and influenced by, and is that how they made it into this show?
To an extent. I mean, I read. Look, I like a lot of Bradbury for sure. I was never into space opera. You know, my science fiction was, Philip K. Dick, who my sister turned me on, who no one knew. You know, it's so funny. Back in the day when Philip K. Dick died, he had like a 2-line obituary in the paper. I don't think he even made it into the New York Times. He had like a 3-line obit in the LA Times. You know, it's so amazing to think back how unknown he was. And I love Philip K. Dick. I love J.G. Ballard, which is a different type of science fiction. But I was never into the Asimovs or the Sturgeons as much, But I know how important they were. And when Zachary pitched, this idea, which this is what if we have a second, this is what I want to talk to Cirroc with. So when you hear this, Cirroc, and I know you did, that he pitched it as a Jake story. It was supposed to be a Jake episode, and it was supposed to be about aliens. It had nothing to do with. It was set in the 50s, had nothing to do with racism, had nothing to do with any of the stuff that it became. It was just Jake being a writer in the 50s, and it turns out that aliens are watching and blah blah blah. And I turned that show down. I said, nope, that's not the Jake show. I want to do. Because I didn't see any bottom to it. I didn't know what it was going to be about, except Star Trek episode about aliens trying to figure out humanity, and I saved that shit for the other shows,
Right.
Other versions of Trek. But do you ever think about that? Do you ever think some version of Far Beyond the Stars, it would have been totally different? Do you ever think that could have been mine?
The Jake show.
Could have been Jake.
That's interesting because we had another writer on who pitched an idea that ended up becoming a show that also said he wrote it as a Jake episode, and
Which
it was
one?
transformed. Ryan, do you remember the episode?
Let me look back. Was it Ethan Kalk? Let's see. How long ago was this?
It was maybe a couple of months ago. Literally,
maybe it was Michael Taylor with Resurrection.
It might have been. Yeah, I can't remember. But either way, I'm glad how it turned out. And ultimately, it could have went this way, could have went that way, could have been a Jake episode. certainly, but I think it has more impact that it is Sisko's perspective. He's the star of the show. He's the captain. It's envisioning a captain in the future. I think it makes more sense for him to be the focal point of it. And as I rewatch it, I still feel like Jake is a central character in this episode. So what happens to Jake is essentially what the show is about. So I still feel like I'm the centerpiece of the episode. And I am satisfied with the performance that I gave as this Jimmy character. Yeah. So I'm okay with it. I don't say, I wish I could have done more, done this. No, I don't look at it that way. I don't look at it with regret. I look at it like it came out the way it was supposed to come out. Avery did a fantastic job directing it. I love the shots where the blending between, Sisko and the past, kind of back and forth, really with the clothing. Good. Yeah, with the clothing from one era into another. I think the shot of Sisko kind of showing up in the middle of the street and getting hit by that taxi, seeing him in uniform in 1953, it was the perfect contrast to kind of set the tone for this crazy episode that we're about to see. So those director choices I thought were excellent. I don't know if they're also in the script or if you guys talked about these in production meetings. But
did we talk to you? Did we? Because I know Rick. Rick. One of those things that he had, which was, I'm not knocking it, but it was like, well, Renee is going to have to play this guy who could be perceived as a racist. So we have to talk to Renee and make sure that Renee won't feel hurt that we're making him. So we actually had to have him talk.
But you guys are like, he's our guy.
It's a great part. What do you think? I mean, it's fine. Yeah. Did we talk to you? Do we have to talk to you about playing Jimmy and any kind of negative thing about that? I don't recall.
I don't remember a conversation about it. The conversations I remember were with Avery about, just giving me background on the character, street guy kind of person that I, know. So he was making me more familiar with that kind of aspect of it. But no, once I put that wig on and I had that toothpick and, I felt like I felt like I selling watches. I was ready to do whatever. I felt like a hustler, and I liked it because it just literally. And that was another thing I loved about the show is some of the accents and voices that the characters changed and altered. We saw Aron Eisenberg take his Nog voice and turn it into a New York, paperboy guy. We saw Dax kind of being this kind of, ditzy kind of.
But not as ditzy as the first thing she's going to be. She actually is not as, she's not.
Well, yeah.
She's got insight. It's just the persona makes you think.
It's the persona, right. And just the overall, like everybody kind of altered their conversational speech. Even O'Brien, he kind of turned into this stuttering guy that, and it was just so natural. And were those notes that you gave, or because I don't remember getting notes. I feel like I just changed it because that's what the character sounded like to me.
Mm-hmm.
All I know, and this is a whole topic that could last hours, is working with Avery on this show was a wonderful experience. I have to say, it wasn't always wonderful working with Avery at times. He could be very difficult, as everyone knows, but we always got along. And, I remember when he was directing other episodes and I'd go down to the set and have to tell him that something needed to be reshot. That was something we should have had the cameras on us because, wow. The first time Rick said, I'm not going down, you're going to have to do it. You go down and tell Avery, which I did, which was an interesting experience. But it began a relationship because when Avery was directing, he was fully engaged in a different way than when he was just acting. I mean, he called me every night. It became a joke with my wife because he would call up and go, hi, this is Avery. She goes, I know it's you, Avery. This is Laura, I'm not his assistant. You can just talk to me like we're both, is Ira home? Is Ira Bear home? Like, okay, Avery. And we talk, we'd have these great discussions about the next day's work. And even before that, during pre-production, I mean, he was so obviously into it. The famous killer line that he gave me at the end of the whole thing when we saw the finished product. And I said, Avery, we did it. And his line was, should have been a two-parter. It's like, God damn it, can't you just say it's good? I'm proud of it. Yes, it could have been a two-parter, but you know what that would have entailed? We would have had to think of that right away, and just getting that show approved and through everything wasn't easy. So, whatever. But the show itself, as an experience, I thought was great. And I remember hanging out at night on the New York street because I wanted to be there. I wanted to watch Avery direct. I wanted to see the whole kind of energy that was there. This was an expensive show. People talk about trials and tribulations and
right.
stuff. This was a very expensive show for us. The extras, the costume, all the things that people who watch it aren't necessarily thinking, like space battles and special effects and stuff. Mm-hmm. It was an expensive show. It was a lot of work. I think it was an 8-day show. I don't think it was a 7-day.
Wow.
But I look back, 8 days. 8 days, man. That should have been a 9-10-day show. If, 2 more days in that episode, and things would have even flowed better in some moments. But it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that show could have used more time. 8 days is like, basic.
It's a blink. Yeah. It's a blink in an eye.
Yeah.
We've got to jump to a break real quick, everybody. But I know I've got about 50 more questions, so it's gonna be a 5-hour, 15-part introspective today. I know Melissa's got a ton of questions, and Cirroc too. We'll get to as many as we can, and we're gonna have a great time. We're gonna take a super quick break, and we'll be right back on the 7th Rule.